Welcome to the Monos Pod, episode 11 with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
Hey, how's it going?
It's good, man. How are you?
Good, good. Already just one more week till it all starts.
That's right. This is our first pod since our trip to Arizona for spring training. A lot of fun. All right. So today we are doing our top 10 starting pitcher fantasy prospects. We had recorded an episode. It was pre Andrew Painter injury. We felt like we needed to kind of redo it, given the injury to Andrew Painter and how that kind of jumbles up the list. So why don't we get started? Matt, who's your number one?
My number one is Grayson Rodriguez. He remains one for me. Um, he's going to probably be number 3 or 4 in the rotation for Baltimore. Um, but obviously has a 1 or 2 upside ceiling for him. He's always been one on my list. There's nothing that has really pushed him back. He has had a little bit of struggle in the spring. I've watched all the starts. He's had great stuff coming out. I think his struggle has been the second time through. And that's been a question mark all throughout his career because they've limited his innings in the minors. So we'll be looking at that closely. But he has the build. He's 6'5", 220. He has the different differentials between walks and Ks that are great. He's at 23% differential there all throughout the minors. He all his stuff has a lot of late life if you watch it. And with that late life, there's a lot of control as well. I think part of his spring, as I've watched him, he is getting acclimated to majors hitters, knowing what gets hit and what doesn't. When he does get hit, even if it was a hard hit, that's when his walk started to come a little bit later in the innings in the spring. So I think it's just all part of the learning process. But his stuff has been elite from all the scouts who have watched him, from myself. He's in between 97 and 99 with his fastball. His off speed has been great. It's just finding the mix and the combination there.
Mhm.
So he remains one for me. He is Yuri Perez is closing in on him, just because, again, with the advantage of watching spring training, Yuri just looks so smooth compared to anybody else. It's just effortless at 99 right now. So but Grayson, there's no reason to not have him as one on my list and keeping him there.
Where have you finished your top 100 update yet?
No, I haven't, but
Okay.
he'd be in my top 10.
So I have Grayson Rodriguez as my number one as well. It was Painter pre-injury. Um, I have him at 8 overall. I believe he went up about 3 spots from my initial top 100 at the beginning of the offseason. I don't have too much more to add. I do. He's one with an asterisk for me because I've got a lot of questions. I think part of why he's one is I know he's starting in the rotation this year. I do love the fastball changeup combination. He does have 5 legitimate pitches. I think 3 of them are plus. Uh, it's plus double plus actually. The slider is also I have graded as a 65 along with the change in the fastball. Um, Ace potential under the potential line for me, it's 200 innings, 2.50 ERA, 0.95 WHIP, and 220 strikeouts. That's kind of the top end potential. But I too see the same issues. The second time through the order in the minors, his stuff would wane a little bit, right? There'd be a little bit of decrease in quality of stuff that second time through the order. And being 6'5", 230 and 23 years old, you would expect, despite the injuries, for him to start to ramp that up a bit. So I don't know. He's a little bit of a porcelain doll for me. He's had injuries. I put him 1 with an asterisk. I don't like him as much as a prospect for my own fantasy purposes as some of the others, but I think his upside, given the park, given the offense that's going to be behind him, if he discovers health and he can get through the order 2.5 times, potentially 3 times, now you're looking at a Cy Young candidate, right? Huge left field, probably a pretty good defense behind him, team that I think will start to win 85 to 95 games a season in the next couple of years. You're looking at 15 to 18 wins, which does matter. Team context is a bit why I have Grayson over Yuri Perez. I'm also a little worried. We'll get to Yuri in a minute, but I'm a little worried about his continued like physical growth and whether that impacts his durability at all. But we can get to that in a minute. So yeah, Grayson's my 1. He's my number 8 overall. Again, it's with an asterisk. I think that my top 10 is a lot closer in from 1 to 10 than I think I initially thought heading into the offseason. But Grayson Rodriguez is still tough, and that he could survive on fastball changeup alone, I think, if he really needed to.
And on the Painter note, yeah, I had him. I think I had him 2 or 3 before the injury, but I just wanted to mention here in the context of prospects how volatile a starting pitcher list would be, right? And I think you had a debate with somebody else from one of our leagues about your list and your defense. I think you didn't have Tiedemann on the top 10. Was that these players are all close, and a list can change at any moment. And it did change at any moment, right? Painter was number 1 on a lot of people's lists, and he's not there anymore.
Right.
On many lists, Abel has jumped ahead of him now in the Phillies prospects, just as far as what's going to happen with his arm. So this could happen to anyone, right? And I think it is very different with a hitter, where you say maybe a hitter has a knee issue. Carroll had the shoulder issue, but Carroll maintained his value even though he was out the whole year. You don't see that with pitchers. It's going to take 1 year for TJS and then another year to recover the stuff.
Right. So, assuming he needs TJ.
Yeah.
It's so for context, Painter was my number 1 starting prospect when I initially made my SP list. He went from 1 to 11 because of the injury, and that's how close I feel like 1 through 10 is. But he only went from 6 overall to 39 overall. So he dropped 33 spots on my overall in my update, but he's not a lost cause, right? It's not as if he's just done, but there are enough pitchers who are healthy, and the majority of whom are close to the majors, that I'm valuing that proximity and I'm valuing that health. And Painter still is incredibly talented. When he's back out off of what I assume to be TJ, he's still going to be 22 years old, right? Which is probably the right place for him to develop. That's another conversation about the pressure that they put on Painter, putting him in camp, talking about him as a potential number 5, and maybe him exerting too much effort in the beginning with his initial outings to try to make the team, and subsequently getting hurt. So I assume Yuri Perez is your number 2.
Yeah, Yuri Perez is my number 2.
Mine as well.
6'9", 190. I think and again, there's questions as far as when the growth is going to stop, how that's going to affect his who he is, but there are always questions with a pitcher that big as far as the repeatability of his delivery, health, and so forth. But he appears to be very smooth in the way he delivers the ball, very effortless. His extension is dynamic. If you got somebody with that extension throwing 100 miles an hour, it's tough to catch up to. He does throw it over the plate a lot. I would rather want that than the opposite. I think his location can be taught. So he did give up some home runs in the spring. At the end of last year, he was hit pretty hard. It's not a huge concern for me. He's 19. He's still learning pitch location with top competition. So to me, it's not a concern. I'd be more concerned if his delivery was inconsistent and he was walking a lot of people. Um, his walk to K differential in the minors is 25%, which is elite. He had 34% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. Again, his home run rate was higher, 2.8%, whereas somebody like Grayson was 0.6. Painter was under 1% as well with his home run rate. His fastballs, average 96, 97, highs in the hundreds, but again, that's a lot more when you consider extension. His fastballs at 70, off speeds in the 60s, and changeup is elite in the 70s. It's an upper 80 mile an hour changeup. Florida, Miami has a great reputation with that as well. And he has great late fade on his pitches as well, just as Grayson does. So yeah, I look forward to seeing how he matures. There's no reason for Miami to rush him. But he kind of had the same thing when I watched his last start as Grayson. He was dominant the first time through and then got hit the second time through. There were I think that his stats, even more so than Grayson, are a little deceptive from spring. He was giving up some kind of cheap singles, and then I think he panicked when players got on base with those hits. So he wasn't hit that hard in the spring.
So there's not a lot for me to cover outside of what you said. I have his fastball, his four-seam fastball, and his changeup both as 70 grade pitches, and his slider as a 65. We talked about him being 6'8", 6'9". I have him at 220. I envision him getting up to 250, 260 as he gets older. So huge extension, as you said, just really kind of a giraffe out there on the mound at this point. What is fascinating to me is that you see the same thing in basketball, where players who of a certain size were typecast into certain roles previously, right? So in basketball, if you were 6'9", you were a power forward, you were a center. Now we see 6'9" small forwards, even 6'9", two guards sometimes. And the players who are 6'9", 6'10" are incredibly coordinated in a way that point guards were reserved for point guards in the past. And with baseball, it's the same thing. If you had a 6'8" pitcher, the big question was, can they repeat their delivery, right? This pitcher's wild. This pitcher throws 98. Are they going to walk, the entire team? Are they going to be able to have control, let alone command? And I think the newer generation of athletes are able to really be coordinated and have command in a different sort of way. And Yuri Perez, to me, is very representative of that. Control is not the question with Perez. Now we wonder, is he going to get to a place where his command allows him to put pitches wherever he wants? That's still a question, but that's a question for virtually every 20-year-old, right? But the fact that he can repeat his delivery at that size is what is most, I think, startling and different about Yuri Perez versus other players. I do wonder if I want to see the slider get a little more tight. I want to see the slider. He's got the arm speed to be able to throw, an 89, 90 mile per hour slider. And I think that would be a game changer for him, because at that point, his slider is going one way and his changeup is going the other. And his fastball would be, 8 to 10 ticks above those two pitches. And that's, at that point, you're damn near unhittable, right? I love him. The reason why I have him below Grayson is, for one, Grayson is starting in the major leagues this year and Yuri isn't. Two, it sounds funny to say, but I trust Baltimore more than I trust Miami. I get that Miami has produced a lot of pitchers, but we can all envision a year where Yuri Perez has gone 160 innings, right, and struck out 200 batters and has an ERA in the low threes, but he's 8-12. I don't trust them to put the right defense behind him. They currently have Gene Segura at third, Joey Wendell at short, and Luis Ariz at second, right? And probably who's their center fielder this year? It's Jazz Chisholm, who's never
Yes.
played center field. So are they valuing defense? It's not a reason to not value a pitcher, but when you put wins plus defense plus not trusting a front office to make the offense better, there are some team context things with Yuri. I also, he's huge, and I wonder if he continues to grow or if he gets heavier, even how does that change his mechanics? I worry about that with someone that big. Um, but those are all things that he's kind of overcome at this point in time, and there's no reason to think that Yuri Perez is not going to be a number one, number two starter very, very soon. He's an awesome watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of Miami, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Shoemaker at the helm. I think Mattingly was kind of old school. You know, was there discipline across the board there? Sixto kind of, he wasn't developed very well. I think there were issues with his weight, and so forth. And can Shoemaker bring in kind of the St. Louis system and the St. Louis way of playing ball there?
Right.
But I wonder how content he is with his infield, right? How much say he has there.
Right.
And I'm rooting for Miami. You have Na there. I really want her to succeed as a woman of color GM, right? And she's done well bringing the pitching in, but I like to see more support from the ownership to pay up for for
some
other players.
non-Avisail Garcia players.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there was a funny picture floating around on Twitter of Nas sitting in the stands after a Avisail Garcia strikeout in spring training, and basically her head was in her hands like, this guy's terrible. So I have Perez at 10 overall, 2 spots behind Grayson. They're kind of 1A, 1B for me.
Mhm.
You know, if you really put my foot to the fire as far as which one do I think ends up being the better pitcher, I would, even though I have Rodriguez at 1, I'd probably go Perez, or which one would I rather roster on my team? But I think Perez is closer. And again, that organization is proving to be pretty sound as far as their thinking goes. I think they've got a really good handle for how to develop young players. And so I'll err on the side of the Orioles for now.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your number 3?
My number 3 is Gavin Williams with Cleveland. 6'6", 255. We don't have much data on him besides last year, as far as stats go, but he's right up there with the elites with the walk to K differential, 34% K rate, 9% walk rate, 25% differential there between walks and Ks, 2% home run rates. I have him at fastball 95, 96 average, 101 can be the tops there. So his fastball is at 70. Off speeds are continuing to develop, but he did that was kind of the critique of him coming out of college. So he has improved his spin since coming to Cleveland, and of course Cleveland is really good at developing that. So he now has an 11-to-5 curve that works off his fastball really well. But I would like to see the other secondaries develop. But he has that talent, and he has that system to be a 2 or even 1 starter. There have been questions as far as, is he a RP versus SP, but after seeing what Cleveland did with him last year, he's definitely solidified himself at that SP position. But it's just keeping a close eye, seeing how he develops within that system. But right now he's number 1 in that system with Vespino going down.
I have Williams at 7, but that's no knock to Gavin Williams. He's my 29th prospect overall in the top 100. I think he's going to end up being a very fastball heavy sort of player, right? He's a big dude, like you said, 6'6", 255. He was drafted in the first round by the Guardians, 23rd overall in 21. Uh, he just looks like an innings eater, right? It's hard not to like cast him into that role because of the size. He did have some health issues in college, but so far in pro ball, he's remained healthy. He had a finger issue and an arm issue in college, but the fastball is big, it's heavy, it sits 94 to 97. Um, I do like the slider a bit. I have the slider and the change at a 55, but I think the slider is developing. I rostered him in our home league last year for quite a while, so I watched a number of his starts, and you can just see him going, 6 innings, 7 innings, kind of that old school traditional starting pitcher, eating up innings. I don't know that he's ever going to be overly dominant, right? That's not necessarily the pitcher that I see. It's not as if he's not going to accumulate strikeouts, but I think he's more of a, mid to kind of a mid 20s percentage strikeout pitcher, 25, 26, 27 in there, and not your 30%, dynamic strikeout sort of pitcher. But again, organizational context really does matter. The Guardians know pitching. You give them a ball of clay to work with, and they understand how to make them into a great pitcher. So he's got great ride up in the zone with the four seam. It's a heavy ground ball inducing pitch when he pitches down. I don't think he's going to hit hard on the fastball as much as if he hangs an off-speed pitch, right? So I don't know. He's the one pitcher on this list that I have as a low risk. I know, as I said, he had injury history in college, but he just looks like a mid rotation starter. And even if he doesn't develop the slider or the change or the curveball in the way that we would like him to, I think he can live off of, be a 65% fastball sort of pitcher and still be very, very good. I also think the Guardians value defense, and I think that'll help him quite a bit as well. So he's a pitcher that I don't know that I would jump to invest in, but I do see him as a very good, fantasy wise, a very good number 2, number 3, maybe a championship number 4 sort of starter for sure. So he's your number 3. He was my number 7. My number 3 starter is Kyle Harrison, San Francisco Giants, left-hander. I have him at 13 overall, 21 years old, 6'2", 200. He was drafted in the 3rd round by the Giants in 2020 as a kind of low 90s fastball sort of pitcher. And the minute he got to the organization, his velocity took a huge jump. So he throws from low 3/4 arm slot, makes it really difficult for batters to pick up his pitches. He's got the four seam that really explodes on right-handers, especially if he can locate it kind of up and on the outer half of the plate. That's a really hard pitch to hit. And as hitters are looking for that, he has a slider with a lot of sweeping action in the mid 80s that he can throw from the same, tunnel it from the same arm slot. And that ends up hitting their back, or getting close to their back foot. So really difficult pitcher to pick up. His changeup is plus. It's got a lot of sink and fade. I love the fact he's got 3+ pitches. I have his fastball and his slider at 65 and his change at 60. The one question for Kyle Harrison is he did walk 10.5% of the batters he faced last year. Of course, that's with the 39.8% K rate in AA. So there is some control and command question with Kyle Harrison, but as of right now, last year he was virtually unhittable. He had 186 strikeouts and 113 innings in high A and AA. His floor for me is a high strikeout, middle of the rotation starter, right? The kind of fantasy starter where you get 150 to 170 innings and close to 200 strikeouts. But I do believe he has ace potential. And again, organization matters. We keep saying it, but some organizations don't know how to teach pitching. You put Kyle Harrison in the Nationals organization, is he on this list? Maybe not, right? But the Giants if the Giants can make Alex Wood and Alex Cobb and this year Sean Manaea and Ross Stripling and all these guys serviceable middle of the rotation starters with some of them with middling stuff, what can they do with a Kyle Harrison, right? That's the way I see this. So I'm super excited to see him. I think he's up. If he continues to perform, I think he's up after 2 or 3 months, and he's up to stay. If nothing else, you're getting a ton of strikeouts from him, and I think a pretty low, not a low whip, because I do think he's going to walk some guys, but I do think he's going to win more games than you think. I don't think he's going to implode necessarily. So I don't know. Super excited about him. He's obviously I roster him in our home league. Love me some Kyle Harrison.
All right. Cool. And briefly speaking of organizations, I massively messed up. It's Ang at Miami. Not Nah. I think I said Nah. So
I said nah too. So
my apologies to her. Well, it was my bad because you were I think you were echoing what I was saying.
mm-hmm.
I created the pattern. So Ang, and we're rooting for her. Anyway, I'm on cough medicine, so it takes me about 5 minutes to catch my errors.
Right.
So anyway, Harrison has moved up on my board. I think initially he was 7. He is now at 5 for me. I watched him a bit. He didn't have very much opportunity this spring, which was surprising because some were thinking that the Giants would want to move him up. But what I like about him, to contextualize this, he's kind of switching spots for Tiedemann on my list for me. I don't see it as much, even though he has weird angles. I don't see as much tension in his arm as Tiedemann. I don't think he overthrows. I like his arm slot. What I like about it, he's not like that funky arm slot that players will eventually get used to, because he's coming from multiple angles. So he's going to continue to be deceptive no matter what with his release point, with his 3/4 arm slot. There's again, like Rodriguez and Perez, there's a lot of fade and sink to his pitches. I think he has 17 inches horizontal break. 40% K rate on his fastball, which is incredible. So yeah, I like his angles, his release points. I think if he gets the control in line, I think he could be easily a 1-2 starter, and I think his floor is right in mid rotation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's one of the pitchers I'm going to be watching, even though you're rostering him, watching a lot in the minors this year, just to see how he develops. Mm-hmm. And the Giants do a great job with that.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with your number 4. Is that right?
Yeah.
Come back with your number 4 and keep it rolling. We'll be right back.
All right.
All right, we're back. Matt, who's your number 4 fantasy SP prospect?
Okay, number 4 for me is somebody who moved up from 8. That is going to be Taj Bradley with Tampa Bay. He's a little on the smaller size, 6'2", 190. He's got 25% K rates, only 6% walk rate, so about 20% differential there. I love his both command and control. I think that was seen in spring. I think if he was on a different team other than Tampa, he would be have the potential of starting starting in the rotation. I like his mix of stuff. He's got great cutting action on his fastball. Again, he has that late break type of kind of movement that I like. I'm not sure. He calls there's debate on whether he has a slider or a cutter. I forgot which he calls it a slider, and I know he calls it a
No, he
cutter,
calls it
and
a
other people.
cutter. People
Okay.
are people think it's a slider. He calls it a cutter. I don't know that it matters. It's a pretty darn good pitch.
Oh yes, yeah. Look, wicked this spring,
Mhm.
and so he's the one. I think he's the only one that I've given a 70 control here, um, for his scouting grades. I just like his makeup. For me, he's the floor player here, and I wanted to put a secure high floor player in the top five, and he's the one for me.
Sure. I Toss Bradley is my number 5. I have him at 22 overall. You know, it's interesting because there are a couple of, I agree with everything you said. Athletic, repeatable delivery, consistent delivery. His approach is consistent, mid 90s fastball, um, mid to high 80s cutter. Just you can see there's a lot of things to love about him, right? Um, I want to see him succeed. I love him as a pitcher. He's smooth. But
Mhm,
I wonder with him a couple things. One is cutter, if his cutter is his best pitch, and the cutter is the pitch that is going to get the outs for him, which is what it looks like in a lot of ways. It's the 165 grade pitch for me.
mhm,
It's a pitch that induces weak contact and is not a strikeout pitch, right? Um,
mhm,
if it had more of the sweeping action, or was more classified as a slider, you would see more swings and misses. So he appears to me as an effective pitcher who may not get the number of strikeouts that you really want from an ace, right? So from a real life perspective, that's great. Fantasy wise, you want to see those strikeouts, right? You want to see the swing and miss. The other
mhm,
question I have with Bradley is that, you know, while Tampa Bay is great at developing young players, playing time is never a given with them. And so I have, since 2018, the high in innings for Tampa starters has been 166, 155, and then 194.2 from Charlie Morton in 2019.
mhm,
So I asked the question when I'm ranking these pitchers, what's the potential or the likelihood of Bradley ever reaching 180 or 190 innings with Tampa Bay? My guess is not very high. And if he does, it's 3 years from now, right? It's 4 years from now. So, I wonder about him. He did throw 133 and a third innings as a 21-year-old last year. And so it looks like they're ramping him up, but Tampa just kind of toys with playing time. You would
mhm,
expect it as a 22-year-old, if he threw 133 and a third innings last year, as a 22-year-old on that team, you would expect them to slot him in as the number 5. But they're
mhm,
not, this year, but they're not necessarily. So I don't know. I love the skills. I love the fastball. I love the cutter. I think that if they choose to really try to get him to develop a changeup or a sweeper or something like that, I think that would be great. But I can't trust the organization to utilize him in the way that I want him utilized, fantasy wise, right?
mhm,
That's why I downgrade him just slightly despite the skills.
mhm. Are they going with Patino in the five slot?
I don't think it's Patino. I think I'm gonna bring them up on roster resource real quick here if I can. Um, let's see. Give me 1 second. I don't. It might be Patino. I thought it was Yanni Chirinos that they
Okay.
were gonna slot in the 5 spot. So roster resource currently has their rotation as McClanahan, Rasmussen, Eflin, Springs, Chirinos,
Okay.
and then Patino in AAA, Fleming in AAA, Taj Bradley in AAA. That's current, and then of note, Mason Montgomery in AA. So that's what they have currently in roster resource. I don't see that as gospel necessarily. I could see Chirinos being flip flopped with Patino, but
Mhm.
again, what are you waiting on with Bradley? Bradley
Mm.
has the highest upside of those three, right? If you include
Yes.
Bradley with Patino and as much as I love Patino, Bradley, Patino, and Chirinos, Bradley's the no-brainer.
Hmm.
Also, you went and signed Zach Eflin. Again, Rays are super smart. Who am I to say? But
Yeah.
you got these guys coming up. You went out and signed Eflin. Like, I know I get that you need 7, 8 starters, but it still didn't make that much sense to me. So
Mm.
we'll see. Bradley's my number 22 overall. I love him. I love the skills. I just strikeouts in organization, I'm not quite sure about.
Hmm.
So my biggest riser on this list, not, oh, maybe not. A big riser for me, I'll say. He went from 63 overall in my initial top 100 coming into the offseason to 14 overall currently. And my number 4 starting pitching prospect is Gavin Stone, right-handed starting pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers organization. 24 years old. He was a 5th-round pick in 2020 by the Dodgers. He's 6'1", 175. You want to see the best changeup in minor league baseball? Watch Gavin Stone. Watch Gavin Stone in his spring starts for the Dodgers. I I'm enamored with the changeup. I Again, he went from 63 overall to 14. I watched a bunch of his starts in minor league baseball last year. He looks even better this spring. When you watch major leaguers struggle with that pitch, you realize that pitch is for real. I have a 75 grade on the changeup, which sounds crazy, but it's that kind of pitch, double plus pitch. Um, it's fast, 4-seam fastball, 60 grade for me, mid 90s, 93 to 96, 50 grade slider. It's a pitch that he's going to have to throw, right? Just for show. But I don't love the pitch as of yet. But he comes from a low 3/4 slot, not quite as low as Harrison, but a low 3/4 slot. He's got a lot of vertical movement on the fastball, which really does take hitters away. Their eye level really changes because the changeup is so elite. Um, he did find some velocity when he in the last year or so. We know that the Mariners and the Dodgers can really develop, get pitchers to find more velocity. I wish the Dodgers would have just slotted him in the 5 spot. I think he's 24 years old. To me, there's no real reason for them to keep him down, but they did, I believe, assign him to his minor league camp already.
Mm.
Just go watch him. Again, 168 strikeouts and 121 and 2/3 innings, 34% strikeout rate, 9% walk rate, 1.12 whip in high A, double A, and triple A last year. It's hard for me not to see him as at minimum a mid-rotation starter, right? But I do think that I think he has 2 potential. I wouldn't call him necessarily have ace potential because he does have a slight build, and I wonder if he can hold up. But 170 innings of really, really effective pitching, absolutely, I can see that happening. Looks like I think they're going to give Ryan Pepio the number 5 spot,
Mhm.
but given the fact that you've got Kershaw, Syndergaard, and Dustin May as your 2, 3, 4, and Pepio as your number 5, who can be inconsistent, I think that we'll see Gavin Stone pretty quickly in the major leagues. I love him. Again, he's my number 4. He'll end up being one of the biggest risers on my top 100, going from 63 to 14. He's a bad man. Where do you have Stone?
I have Stone at 10. He entered my list. He wasn't on my list previously, but seeing him in spring, I don't have really much to add as far as what he has to offer. My only caution is with the Dodgers, but they tend to be a little more lenient with bringing prospects up when it comes to pitchers versus other players,
Sure.
hitters. So um yeah, I could see him coming up with with some sort of injury. I really, they seem to do have kind of a pecking order with their prospect pitchers. I wonder where Miller's going to come in and when he's going to come up. But again, with the injury history of the other starters, I could see both of them playing significantly this year.
Right. Well, and I have Miller lower on my list below Stone, but
Mm.
what I think is interesting is, do they want, so a couple things. Do you want, if I'm the Dodgers, Gavin Stone has better command, right? Better control. You're going to get, he may not quite have the elite ceiling that Bobby Miller does, but if you're the Dodgers, what is it that you want from that young starter? Do you want consistent outings that you can count on because you're in contention, or are you looking for something elite from Miller? If I'm the Dodgers, I'm siding on the side of Gavin Stone, right? I want consistent pitching. I want someone who's going to be in the zone. If you get hit, okay, I just don't want you blowing up the way Miller has a propensity to do. I also think that Miller, because it's fastball, he does have a dynamite double plus change, but
Mhm.
fastball breaking ball, right? If you told him to just be fastball breaking ball, you can see him in a fireman role or an eighth inning role very quickly. Whereas because Stone is fastball changeup or even changeup fastball, that's more of a starter profile, right? You don't see a lot of, you've got to have a Fernando Rodney changeup, which Gavin Stone may have, in
Mhm.
order to be a fastball changeup reliever. The only other ones I can think of, like maybe Alex Colomé and like Doug Jones or something like that, right? So
Uh,
in my mind, Stone is the next elite prospect, right? They talk about Grove and Pepio, but I don't think they're at the level of a Gavin Stone. So we'll see what they do. At minimum, you'll see
where
him. Go ahead.
where do you see his ceiling and floor as far as 1 through 5?
You mean fantasy or real life for Stone?
Fantasy.
Fantasy wise, I think he gets as close as two.
Mhm.
Um, if I had like this year, Max Scherzer is my ace. If
Mhm.
Stone was my number two, and I could take 2023 Scherzer and put him out 2 years, and Stone is who I think he can be, I'd absolutely have him because I think it's 170 innings, 190 strikeouts, 1.1 whip, right? He's in that like kind of George Kirby,
Mhm.
uh, high end Logan Gilbert, different types of pitchers, but those types of stats, right?
Mhm.
I think he's that kind of pitcher. So I would want to have a number of Gavin Stones. Maybe my 2, 3, 4 are all very similar, but I think he can take that role very easily. What about you?
Yeah, I can see him as being the solid two. He's a prototypical two across the board
Mhm.
for fantasy. Um, yeah,
So I have Bradley at 5. He was my number 22 overall. You had
Harrison at
at
5.
5. Who was your
Uh-huh.
6?
My 6 is Bobby Miller.
Uh-huh.
So I got Miller. He has the prototypical pitcher's build with 6'5", listed as 220, probably more now. 31% K rate. His he can get out of control, but his walk rate isn't extremely high. So
Mhm.
I have him between 7.5 and 9.5 in the minors. Um, He's averaging 98, so he has the highest average fastball of any player on the board here. Can easily get into the hundreds. Um, he has the high 80s to 92 slider. I like that. I like that hard slider that goes along with it, as well as his change. So I think he has 3 solid pitches to be a solid fantasy asset. The only reason I have him above Stone is I'm going with ceiling here. So I could see him as if he learns control command, I could see him as an ace for a great team.
Mhm.
That's of course a big if, but he does have that upside. So I would roll the dice on his upside here, as well as his physicality as well. Stone is
Mhm.
what, 6'1", 180,
Yep.
and Miller has that build to be the workhorse and the ace of that staff, 5 years down the road.
He does. He went 29th overall first round by the Dodgers in 2020. He's a puzzling one for me because I know you tend to err on the side of you want to see the build, you can envision the innings, right? You can envision the health, and Bobby Miller fits that kind of framework to a T. Again,
Mhm.
6'5", 220, probably closer to 240. Big fastball, can go four seam or two seam. Slider with, impressive movement. Great changeup, could end up being his best pitch ultimately. I don't have, despite the stuff, I don't have above a 60 grade on any pitch for him, because I think his command is just isn't good yet, right? His control is, and he's a good example of the difference between command and control. As you said,
Mhm.
7.9% walk rate, is in the zone enough, but doesn't locate yet. Like, really doesn't locate much at all. When he does, he's unhittable. But the command just isn't there. I have his command at 45 currently. Um, so what I have under his risk is mid, and I see three possible outcomes for Bobby Miller. One, he's a dominant number two starter, a horse who throws 180 to 200 innings per year with a low threes ERA and tons of strikeouts. Two, his command never improves, but he's durable enough to be a high threes, low fours ERA with tons of strikeouts, whose numbers never quite match the stuff. So, like, who'd be a good example of that? Like Nathan Eovaldi or someone like that, right? Where
Mhm.
you see the huge fastball and you just want to see a little more from him.
Mhm. Kind of Lynn in his early years.
Totally. And then, or number three, he becomes a high leverage reliever, striking out 30+% of the batters he faces, and is an asset in a hold saves league. But he's not young
Mhm.
for a prospect. He doesn't really have a true path to the Dodgers rotation unless we're talking about 2024. But you also have Gavin Stone, Nick Nastrini, Nick Frasso, and the next, Dodgers cyborg that's coming, as, that can pass him by if he doesn't find that command. So the stuff is
Uh-huh.
special. I just don't know what he's going to end up being. And if I'm
Mhm.
comparing Bobby Miller to some of the guys we've spoken about already, I'd rather invest my roster spot or my draft assets in one of the players we've talked about already. And for me, just from
Mhm.
a profile standpoint, I like the Gavin Stone. I'm starting to like the Gavin Stone type profile more so than the Bobby Miller type profile. I think that there's command is just such a huge deal. Maybe it's
Mhm.
the George Kirby influence for me, but command is such a huge deal, and the ability to change speeds is also a huge deal for me.
Mhm. Yeah, so we see Stone and Bradley moving up your boards because of that.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and it's interesting. If the Dodgers, as expected, are in it, and during the trade deadline, if someone wants an arm, what arm are they going to trade? And I can see Miller at the top of that list
Right.
as far as number one request, and number two, the Dodgers' willingness to trade him.
Right.
Be
Well,
interesting
and
to see.
it'll also speak to the organization that would acquire one of those two. It would speak to their philosophies as well, right?
Yeah.
Because I
Mhm.
think different organizations would value one pitcher over the other. The Mariners, as an example, can almost promise you would value Gavin Stone over Bobby Miller. Not that
Mhm.
they couldn't teach the command, but I just think that um, that you look at, again, the Gilbert Kirby command profile, even Castillo with the type of command that he has, it's important to them.
Mhm.
Uh, so we'll move on to six.
So
Uh,
you're six.
my six is, and I'm holding on for dear life here, is Ken Waldachuk.
Okay.
I get that he struggled. He's my 23 overall as well.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen some of the struggles in spring training this year. He's 25 years old, left-handed starting pitching prospect, 6'4", 220, drafted in the fifth round by the Yankees in 19. He's traded with J.P. Sears, Luis Medina, and Cooper Bowman for Frankie Montas and Lou Trevino at the 22 deadline. Three-quarters arm action, big fastball with carry, similar to Harrison in that way. Sweeper slider with the 1-7 movement, the back foot type of slider that we talked about, and a changeup that has quite a bit of movement as well. I have his fastball as a 65. His extension is elite. The spin pushes that grade up a little bit. It's in the mid 90s, and his slider as a 60. I still see a high strikeout number two starter. So watching his spring starts, there were two different starts that I watched. where he got squeezed beyond belief. I was watching and I wanted to see what I want to see the stuff. I wanted to see the reaction of the hitters, but I was stunned to see him get squeezed. So he may give up hits, but if you're down 2-0 all the time because you're getting squeezed by the ump, what are you supposed to do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so to me, some of the performance that I saw in his spring is not Ken Waldichuk being a shitty prospect as much as it was um, context of the spring and context of the particular umpire in that situation. One of the other one of no one of the other things that I saw with Waldichuk is that so he goes to Oakland, right, where he now has tons of opportunity. And the rolling 3-year park factor in Oakland for the overall park factor is 94 according to Savant over the past 3 years. And the overall or the home run factor for right-handed hitters in Oakland is 76, meaning it's 24% more difficult than an average park to hit a home run for a right-handed hitter. So he's going from New York, which is for a right-handed hitter is pretty much average, to the most difficult park to hit a home run for a right-handed hitter in baseball. I love that. There's opportunity for him. There's a big park for him. His wins, you're going to have to just punt, essentially, right? Because he's on Oakland. But I see strikeouts. I see a lower whip. I see and I see a ton of fly balls to left field being caught. Also take into account that they have like probably twice as big of a foul ground as any other park in baseball. And to me, all the context is there for him to be good. One other thing about his spring is he actually has, because of the injuries in the athletics rotation, there's a very good chance that he ends up, despite having bad numbers in the spring, that he actually ends up in the rotation. So to me, he's a buy low and a buy now. The fastball, slider, changeup are dynamite, and he's an example. Just go watch him. Don't listen to what everyone has to say about who he is as a pitcher. Go watch him pitch and then come back and decide whether you think he's a talented pitcher or not.
Mm-hmm.
Is he still on your list?
He's in my top 15.
Okay.
He going off your comment about profile, he does fit the profile as far as the physical makeup of an innings eater starter that is that has good stuff. So not just that the 3-4 innings eater, but the type that could give you a lot of innings and also give you quality innings.
Right.
I'm just looking up on our league. You didn't draft him, huh?
I did.
You did?
I did.
Oh, you did. Okay. Yeah,
I think I got him in the 5th.
okay. He was on my draft board, and when I was looking for him, he wasn't there. So you were the one that snagged him.
I did. So one other thing with Waldichuk, and when we talk about park context again, if you think about Cole Irvin, right? Cole Irvin doesn't have half the stuff that Ken Waldichuk does. And Waldichuk's problem is not necessarily control or command all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just think about how or any of the left-handed starters that have been in the Oakland A's organization over the past 10 years. You talk about them as all-stars, or you talk about them as number one starters for Oakland, like a Dallas Braden, or like I said, a Cole Irvin, or you see them trade for JP Sears and you imagine him as a back of the rotation starter because Oakland is such a big park that you can get away with mistakes. And so for me, Waldichuk, when you couple that plus the strikeout rate in the minor leagues, he was 34.5% strikeout rate between AA and AAA last year, right? If he can be a high 20s K rate type of pitcher in Oakland, it's all there. So I'm not worried too much about the spring. Like I said, as I watched, I saw him get squeezed a ton. He remains very high on my SP list. Again, he's my number 6 and he's 23 overall.
All right.
All right, you're up.
So number 7, this is who I flipped with Harrison, because I see them kind of similar. Ricky Tiedemann, Tiedemann 6'4", 220, Toronto. He has 9.8% walk rate, 35% K rate. So he's in that elite zone between walk and K at 25%. A low home run rate because of the ground ball contact he produces. He has gone down on my list because something I think we talked about when everybody was posting on Twitter that 99-mile-an-hour fastball. Remember that at the start of camp? Everybody was saying how elite he was. And I think both of our comments were that's an injury waiting to happen. I think very similar to Painter. I think there was pressure. He put pressure on himself to overperform in the spring, and he doesn't need to throw at 99 to be great. So I found that kind of interesting, but also sad at the same time because I want to see him succeed. And he averaged 94 on his fastball. If he's in the mid 90s, he gets enough movement to produce weak contact or a high K rate. Right. So I'm hoping Toronto will continue to develop him. This is a type of pitcher that maybe if he was in a different org, he would be developed better, like in a St. Louis, or even he'd be underused in Tampa, but at least they would know, they would have a sense of having a system to develop him. I'm not knocking Toronto as far as they know a lot more than I do, but at the same time, I don't see a consistent system there with Toronto. Right. So yeah, I think we've talked about before on other pods. There's concern about the ground ball contact with the Toronto defense. They don't have an elite shortstop there. They did improve the outfield, but that's not going to help him with his ground ball rate. I do like his very similar to Harrison. He's bigger than Harrison, but he does have these interesting arm slots, creating different angles, which creates interesting spin and confuses hitters as well. So I just hope his health it improves. They shut him down, but not as a huge concern, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, they shut him down. I don't remember exactly what it was. They did shut him down after a couple of starts in the spring. They also shut him down last year for a little while. So two things. The shutting him down in the spring gives me pause, right? Obviously, all of us. He's my number 41 overall and just behind Painter at number 12. So I'm not all the way out on him, but as you pointed out, the effort and the stress on his arm when you watch him pitch looks like he should be sitting mid 90s and not trying to hit 99. Mm-hmm. And he's a strong looking dude. Like, it looks like he's muscling it to a certain extent. And that makes me a little bit nervous. I'm not all the way out on him. And I had him early last year. I think the numbers speak for themselves. But as you pointed out, between the organization, the current defense, the propensity to give up ground balls, the home park being turf, the effort in the delivery, and, as much as I like pitchers that pitch to contact a little bit because they can get deeper in games, for someone like him, he might give up a ton of base hits because of it, right? Given that context. So what I'm getting to is I'll let someone else take Tiedemann because I'm sure most everyone regards him slightly higher than I do. Mm-hmm. So he was your number 7, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I had Gavin Williams at 7, 29 overall. I had Bobby Miller. We talked about Bobby Miller already. I had him at 9, 37 overall. Who's your 8?
My 8 is the other Miller, Bryce Miller for Seattle, 6'2", 180. Just sent down to the minors. That's where he's going to start, but he'll be up soon. He's older compared to these others. What is he, 24?
He is 24.
He moved through the system quite speedily. I wish they had a metric for this, and I was watching Ashcraft start last night for Cincinnati, and the broadcasters were talking a lot about this. I wish there was a metric for how hitters react to pitchers, because that says a lot about their stuff. And when it comes to Miller, you just see that baffled look from the hitters he faces, as well as his own teammates. I know there's going to be bias there, but his teammates, when they were facing him early, said, what is coming at me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has those 2 sliders with different breaks. He has an elite fastball. Baseball America put him up as one of the best fastballs in the minors in their update. So he sits at 96, can easily get to 100. It's also a high spin fastball too. So tons of movement with his fastball to go along with his 2 sliders. To me, that's enough. As far as, he could develop his other off speed, his change, his curve, but with that high spin fastball and the 2 sliders that that move in different ways, I could see him being an asset to the Mariners this year, especially if Gonzalez struggles at the 5 slot in the rotation. So he was 8 for me, and he remains at 8. But in my overall ranks, he has climbed a bit on my boards.
Mm-hmm. But he is also my 8. I had him at 46 at the beginning of the offseason, caught a bunch of flack for that. Now everyone's moved him up. Okay, whatever. He's at 33 now for me overall. I do wonder with the Mariners, not because of Miller, but because of their current rotation. You wonder if Miller, if they put him in some sort of multi-inning role to begin with, if you get decent production from Gonzalez, or you want to give batters a different look throughout the rotation, right? Have some diversity within the rotation. Maybe you have a Chris Flexen in there as the number 5. And so maybe we see Bryce Miller as a high leverage reliever, right? And which is crazy because there's already Munoz and Sewald and Brash, and like, how many relievers does this team need? I love it. But yeah, to your point, he found velocity and command after being drafted by the Mariners out of Texas A&M. He was a reliever, I believe, until his final year at A&M. But huge fastball, right? Watch him pitch. It's like it's coming out of his hand, and then all of a sudden it's on you. And hitters, like you said, they look like they have no idea what's going on when he pitches. And then when he throws a slider, he's completely pulling the string on him. Really fun pitcher to watch, like kind of a Bugs Bunny-ish to me, almost like cartoon-like in the reactions and in the explosiveness of the pitches. I can see him as, especially on the Mariners, I can see him as a high leverage reliever for a couple of years, right? Say eventually Gonzalez goes away and Robbie Ray is older and they either trade him or find a different role for him. That's when Miller steps up. But for now, he's an asset one way or another. And if we're just grading out on starting pitching ability and health and all the other factors we take into consideration, he's certainly in the top 10 for me and number 8 overall.
All right. The only major concern I have with him, and you can see this on MLB.com, the Mariners went to In-N-Out Burger on a golf cart, and he didn't know what a double-double was. And
you know what?
Huge, man. You gotta.
He looks like he doesn't know what a double-double is either. That's funny. All right, we'll come back with our 9 and 10, and then kind of an overview of the SP group. We'll be right back. All right, Matt, your number 9.
My number 9 is, pull this up here, is Brandon Pfaadt for Arizona, 6'4", 220. I have him and Stone next to each other as high floor players. I see him as high floor and having the build that I like, 6'4", 220, be a definite innings eater. I think he is under the radar. not anymore because he's probably the most hyped starter when it comes to fantasy boards, right? But just under the radar. Before that, because his stats were kind of deceptive, playing in the most hitter-friendly parks in AA and AAA. To me, he has elite command, so his command numbers are even better than a Bradley, and then a Stone. So his 32% K rate, 5% walk rate. His differential is the highest, 27% when it comes to walks to Ks. That's one of the things I look for the most when it comes to minor stats. I more or less ignore ERA, and he's one you kind of want to ignore that with because of the park he was at. His fastball sits 94. He get 96, 97. He has a slider that is probably in his round 60, moves across the zone very well. His change also has a lot of movement. It just isn't an out pitch. So he has 3 solid pitches with elite command. So the question is, how is this going to translate? Because he is going to be at, I think Arizona remains as the second highest park in the league when it comes to elevation and effect on the ball. How is that going to play out? That he's, it's not going to be as hitter friendly as AA or AAA, but it's still going to be pretty hitter friendly. It also is going to be a young team. I could see it being an elite team maybe when he reaches his elite phase, or when he reaches his peak phase, I should say, of his career. But I could see him as a solid number 3 starter. I could see him as a 2 on Arizona. And just that high floor type of player. I wanted to draft him myself. Kind of glad I didn't, because I'd have a minors issue because he was just sent down. I thought he would have a chance to make the team, but he didn't ultimately. But he'll be up this year, and we'll be able to see how that plays out in Arizona.
What's his upside?
I said a 3 for most teams, a 2 for Arizona. If Arizona does improve their staff once their young guys come up, he'd be a 3 there as well. I could see him as on a fantasy team. Oh, fantasy team. He'd be a 5 starter for me. Give me innings, not going to kill me. Going to give me Ks, not going to kill my whip. And if Arizona improves, he's going to give me wins and not kill me with losses.
Or he kills you with losses because Arizona's not very good.
I'm this year or next year.
I'm not a believer. He's not in my top 10. He's someone I forget about a lot. I think he's got 3 okay pitches with pretty good command, right? And so he's got like the really, really, really discount George Kirby profile, but without any sort of explosion. I don't see it. I see a park with a high park factor. They're 10th overall, rolling 3 years, 101 overall. Difficult to hit a home run, but very easy to hit base hits there. I don't see the explosion. I don't see the nasty stuff. And those pitchers to me end up, they're not the pitchers that I want to invest in. If they get better, right? If we see him pitch well over the course of the next couple of years, then sure, in a redraft, you start to value him as a mid-rotation starter. But if we're talking about investing in a player while they're in the minor leagues because we believe in their talent, he just isn't on that list for me. And I've been puzzled all offseason as to why he's had so much helium. People are in love with him, right? You see him in top 5 lists. And when I put him as a pitcher next to any of the guys we had just talked about, there's no way in hell. He's not, and he's already 24, right? So you wonder about, I also wonder if when players when they're right there on the cusp of becoming a major leaguer, I think everybody wants to jump on that pitcher or that player.
Well, he does have proximity, but he isn't throwing flat stuff. He gets tons of spin on his stuff with near elite command. Okay. So just because it's exploding out at 97, 98 isn't necessarily an indicator. You know, you would expect that from a 6'4", 220, 230 guy, but he is moving his pitches quite a lot across the zone.
If you make the argument that he's a pitcher and not that he's an artist, right? Like if he continues to develop, I know he's got plus command. If he continues to develop that command, right? And he's a brilliant mind of a pitcher, then sure. But we don't always have those indicators, right? That's what's going to actually happen. And I don't know that the Diamondbacks are the champions of pitcher development, right?
Uh-huh.
You got a current shitty team, and you got a place where the ball flies. Like, I don't see it. And I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just personally don't see it. My 9 is Bobby Miller. We talked about him already, 37th overall. My 10 is Tink Hence. So we're talking about the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? 29-year-old versus 20-year-old. Arizona versus St.
Hence
Louis.
is on my Hence is in my top 12. You know, it's just you know, what to me the argument is, what are we going to include? What am I going to include personally on my top 10?
Sure.
And for me, I want to have some floor players, some dependable players that I could look for late in drafts that are going to give me innings. I agree with you that he isn't that, you know, high upside ceiling investment that some would want to argue should be in a top 10 list of an SP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're arguing there. I totally give that to you, but for me, it's about balancing out my list. I invest in Hence a lot more than Pfaadt. I love Hence.
Right.
Hence could be a one starter with that control, with that curveball, with that fastball. But to me, it's all about balance here.
Sure. My list is balanced as well. I'm just not balancing it with the shitty number 4 starter. That's the difference, right? So, you know, if we're talking balance,
you can't categorize them all of a sudden as a shitty 4 starter.
Or I could, because that's what I think of him. But if I've got Gavin Stone, who I think is 24 years old and on the cusp, right? If we want to talk about Pfaadt in the same way, and I've got Waldichuk, who I believe in his stuff, and the context I think is a little bit better in terms of park, and I just think he's a little better.
In terms of park.
Also, as a pitcher, I just think he's a better pitcher. We've got Gavin Williams on this top 10 list, who is also kind of your big horse, good organization on the cusp of making the major league roster, you know, as a 4 or 5 starter. You've got Bobby Miller, who has the potential to be that with just a little bit more command, but is of the age that he's going to have to be on the major league roster soon. I don't think that our lists are at all different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just disagree with what I think his upside is. That's all. Mm-hmm. And I would rather take a single A Tink Hence, who's never thrown above 52 1/3 innings in a minor league season, but who I watched dominate major league hitters in spring training. Again, another pitcher who hitters had no idea what to do with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So real quickly, Tink Hence, 20 years old, 6'1", 175, drafted 63rd overall in the 2020 draft by the Cardinals, out of Arkansas. 65 is 4-seamer as a 65. He's 95 to 99. Curveball as a 60. Changeup as a 60. He's got a show me slider that's a 50 pitch for me right now. But man, he's just fun, right? He's got the high socks, the high striped socks. You know, he's like skinny, like my comp was Carl Edwards Jr., right? He's got that really, really, really skinny build. But high velocity, high spin, shouldn't come out of that frame. He's got quite a bit of effort in the delivery, so I am very nervous about his health, right? He's an extreme health risk as far as I'm concerned. Kind of your modern day type of pitcher, in that if you get 140 innings from him, you're going to be happy, because you probably are getting healthy. You're getting 180 strikeouts or so. He had a 41.5% strikeout rate last year with a 7.7% walk rate. I guess as a nod to you, if you're building a team and you're looking for fantasy wise, you're looking for the highest upside, right? Tink Hence is your play. If you're looking to fill out your rotation and you need a, number 6, number 7 starter on your fantasy rotation, Brandon Pfaadt is the player you put here, right? In the same way that I used a roster for Jared Schuster, who's
Mhm.
left-handed, starting pitching prospect for the Braves. He's 24 years old. He's a first-round pick out of Wake Forest, but he doesn't have the same upside as Tink Hence. We all know that, right? But you need to fill your roster out with those types of pitchers in order to have a full staff.
And I think that's a good way of saying it, right? So we're in the hybrid league, right? So Pfaadt may be worth more in the hybrid league because we could only keep 5, or we only have 5 minor slots. But in a dynasty league, there's no way in hell I'm going to trade a Hence over a Pfaadt, right? Because in dynasty, you have the room to invest in somebody like a Hens.
Sure. I
Who I
would
love as
also,
well.
but I would argue.
And
Go ahead.
seeing him in the AFL as well, not only in the spring, he was dominating hitters. He's smaller, but just fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. I would argue that, and this may be the difference in our evaluation of Pfaadt, but again, as you said, we keep 15, draft 15 in our hybrid keeper league. And when I look at Brandon Pfaadt, I see a pitcher who is on the cut, like at his peak, is kind of a late keeper, early round draft pick, right? So he's a guy who I'd say, okay, he's not elite. So, but I may want to keep him because he's providing me innings and some strikeouts. But can I get another guy like him and keep a higher upside player instead of him, right? Is that type of pitcher a major league number 3, number 4, a SP5, SP6 on a fantasy team that is potentially replaceable? Is that the kind of pitcher you want to invest in from the beginning? Or is it the elite high upside guy who might flame out, but also may be an ace for you? Right? It's the same debate that I've had with Logan Gilbert for years. Logan Gilbert is not elite. His highest upside is a number 2, right? His floor is probably a 3-4 MLB wise. He's a 4 or 5 starter in fantasy, but he is consistent. He's healthy. He gives me 150 to 170 innings. I'm almost assured of that. That to me is like Pfaadt's upside, is the consistent mid-3s ERA type of guy. And even Gilbert was a player that if I could have traded him for a higher upside pitcher, I would have. And I debated at times whether he's truly worth me keeping or if I want to deal him for other assets, right? So that's my argument with Pfaadt is I'm not saying he's horrible. I'm saying that is he talented enough to want to invest in and to want to research? All right.
I'm with you.
Enough on Brandon Pfaadt. We probably spent more time on him than anybody on this list. Do you have any thoughts about the list overall, about the group of starting pitchers overall, or anyone you want to bring up who was not in our top 10 but is worthy of mention?
I'll bring up a couple. One isn't a starting pitcher, but one is a pitcher I saw live when Team USA was playing the Angels, and that would be Ben Joyce. Reliever, he hasn't been sent down by the Angels yet. I'm hoping he makes the team. I think they just had an injury with Marte as a reliever. He may be able to make the team. But just seeing him easily mow down the USA players with control. He threw a couple days ago 104. And his arm isn't falling off when he does that. Just a great story as drafted as an RP. He's just a great guy to invest in, especially in Fantrax leagues. He's like a lot of pitchers coming up. He's listed as an SP, so he definitely will. Even if he doesn't make the team from straight out, he will be on the Angels this year. He will be one of those pitchers that you could put in the SPRP position. The big question is control once he starts facing the big leaguers, you know, and command within that. You know, how much is he going to be able to command his fastball and off speed there? The other one that I'm interested in looking at, just because he's getting a lot of talk, not just on like Yahoo or us or podcasts, but from scouts themselves, is Reagans from Texas, a #1 pick, I think all the way back in 2016, a lefty, consistently throwing. He's gone through 2 Tommy John surgeries. In some sense, in the modern game, that's kind of good news because he's already had it, right? But now that he's had full recovery, he's easily throwing 97, 98 from the left side with a lot of movement. A lot of scouts have talked about his consistency with his movement as well, consistency with his approach. I'm just going off what I read on Baseball America. I haven't looked at him myself, but he's one that I'm looking forward to watching if he gets another spring start or when he's sent down to the minors. He could be up, they're saying, to be Texas's 5 at some point this year.
Did you just bring up Cole Reagans on a top 10 SP fantasy?
No, I didn't say he was top 10. I just said you were saying.
I know you did. I'm stunned. I appreciate it. I'm stunned. Maybe I got to go.
I'm just telling you the next guy I'm looking at. That's the next guy I'm watching.
I got to go back and watch some more Cole Reagan starts, I guess. So just real quickly, I'm going to go down the rest of my top 100. Just pitchers of note. I've got Espino at 43. I love him. I'm sad. Very sad, because I had him, I was going to keep him, was looking forward to watching him pitch. Dylan Lesko is one that I'm excited to see. He was the top rated starting pitcher coming out of the 22 draft and was injured. And so we haven't really seen him yet. I have Hunter Brown at 63. I know lots of people are really high on him. I'm not quite as high. It's not my Astros bias. It's just, I don't quite see it. Brandon Barreria is 65, left-handed, first-round pick by the Blue Jays. I think he's going to be a fast riser, a little smaller frame. Harleen Susana dropped a bit for me. I have him at 71. And then you're getting into like the Jack Leiter, Emerson Hancock, Max Meyer type of range.
Where do you have Boz?
I don't have him on the list. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about him. And again, Tampa scares me, so I'm not really sure what to make of him as of right now. I probably should group him with Meyer because I know a slightly different timetable, but similar type of, smaller build, huge fastball, huge slider, difficult on the arm, on the shoulder, potentially great pitchers, but we don't know if they're ever going to be healthy. The other 2 I have are Bubba Chandler and Noah Schultz. Bubba Chandler was a 2-way player, a big football recruit who has just started pitching full-time on the Pirates. And Noah Schultz was the 6'9" left-handed starting pitcher, high school starting pitcher drafted by the White Sox. Of those, I guess I don't feel incredibly passionate about any of them quite yet. I think that there's a lot of talent there. The one for me to watch is probably Lesko, because I think he could potentially jump really quickly if he comes out of the gates in the same way he was in high school.
You have any sleepers?
Any sleepers? I think that includes
like the Reagan type of thing.
Cole Reagan's type, you said?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I think that philosophically, I guess Bryce Miller would have been my sleeper because I had him ranked in the top 50 prior or at the very end of last season going into the offseason. And that's somewhere that he's a pitcher others didn't have there. But honestly, if I'm looking at young pitching, I'm looking for upside because I believe in fantasy, you can find the mid-rotation guys later on. And I think some of those mid-rotation guys will develop later on. But it is unlikely that you are going to be able to find a 21-year-old, a guy who's been in the minors for 3 years with ace potential unrostered, right?
Mhm.
I think in order to acquire those guys, at least in any sort of keeper league, in order to acquire those guys, you have to be on them early. And so I'd rather look for the elite upside early and fill out the rest of my rotation later on if I have to.
Mm-hmm. I have a philosophical question about that.
Sure.
So obviously in dynasty leagues, that's what you want to do, right? Because you have the space, you want to find the aces when they're young and identify the skills and the talent that that's going to lead to that ace producing one day. What about in our league where we we only have 5 minor slots?
Mhm.
Is it worth keeping a potential elite one SP who maybe is 3 years out? That's what I always debate.
Currently, no,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't believe currently no, or currently it is worth it because there aren't enough managers in our league who do it, right? So you could not keep a guy or keep a guy under wraps and wait because there's only a handful of managers who are actually looking for those types of players. I think if
Mm-hmm.
all 16 managers in our league did it, then it would be worth it because there would be more competition for those players. There's not a ton of competition for Tink Hens. The competition was you, me, and probably 3 or 4 others, right? If
Mm-hmm.
that. The other part of the argument is, are you willing to do it given the propensity for injury for young pitchers, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
a part of the argument. I think in a perfect world, you have 4 hitters and 1 pitcher that you believe in your minor league slots because we have 5 minor league slots. So I will tend to err on the side of 2 pitchers because I love pitching and it's just fun for me. Um, but I think if I was being completely objective and uh, not playing favorites isn't the right word, but not just going about it based on my emotions, then I would keep 4 hitters. I'd keep 1 pitcher that I believed in who probably has already been in Double A, meaning he's pretty close to the major leagues. That objectively is what I would do. So the short answer is no. I don't think that rostering a pitcher who's 3 years away in single A is worth it. Otherwise, you know, maybe I'd have Harleen Susana, who's got maybe the highest upside of any pitcher we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah, I
hope
think
that I
looking
hope
at our list here, I think Hens is the only one that is not rostered right now. But if you go down the list, G-Rod was rostered all last year, largely because they thought he was going to come up last year but then he had the injury. But Perez was picked up as a free agent, I think initially by Brandon and then traded around. He was rostered most of last year. Williams was rostered most of last year, but I don't think he was. Did you draft him?
I did not. He was
Yeah.
drafted. I did not draft him.
Bradley was picked up. Harrison was picked up by you. Miller, I think, was picked up by Balls Deep. Tiedemann was picked up by you. Miller wasn't even rostered last year. Stone, I think Smurf had Stone, but and then he was drafted this year. Hunter Brown was picked up late last year. Espina you had him a lot last year, but I think he was free and now Hence is free. So yeah, so to that point, there's really nobody that was invested in heavily besides G-Rod when it comes to going back to double A or even single A.
Right.
But
I
hopefully
had
nobody
I had
hope,
Harrison in high A
okay.
before he got to double A. So I picked up Harrison very early last year.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I drafted Hens this year,
Mm-hmm.
in our draft. And so I'm trying to
Oh,
move.
you have Hence. So
I
Hence
do.
is roster. Oh,
I
I
do.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh shoot. Okay.
So in my mind, it's once they hit double A and they dominate double A, everybody knows who they are. It's a matter of whether you want that player or not, right? But
Mm-hmm.
as far as getting ahead of the curve, to me, the curve is now, do you see pitcher performing well in high A, and can you get him before he hits double A, understanding that, kind of projecting what you think he can do. To me, that's the window to get ahead of the rest of the league. I also think that's the window in a lot of different leagues. And we can speak of it in terms of dynasty as well, because in dynasty, everybody rosters everyone. We know that. But can you go to a manager and say, what is it going to cost me to get Bubba Chandler, right? When they don't see Bubba Chandler as an elite prospect, but you think that he's going to blow up this season. I think it's all the same argument, whether it's a hybrid keeper or a dynasty. It's figuring out what the right window is to roster a starting pitching prospect. And when his value is still low enough to acquire at a low cost, but the potential is something that you can see. Right?
Yeah, and a lot of these starters that blossom that aren't on top 10 lists, like a Harrison at the start of the year, could be snagged in a dynasty league.
Right.
Whereas you can't snag up a hitter that maybe just be a mid-range prospect, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good point as far as dynasty goes.
All right. You got anything else with SP?
Nope. And we're doing our top 100 tomorrow, right?
Top 100 update. Let's hope it doesn't take us 6 podcasts like it did for the initial top 100.
Oh, yeah.
And then we will be doing on Baseball and Coffee, we will be doing our kind of preseason predictions with Aaron Alvis and Doug Smurfatron's Jasro as well. So that'll be a 4-man pod coming up Saturday afternoon. Should be a lot of fun.
All right, great.
It's good to see you, brother.
Thanks, man. Good seeing
Thanks,
you.
man. All right.